Does this work, I wonder? All right, good morning/afternoon. It is technically still morning. It's not quite 12 o'clock yet, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We're supposed to start at 11:30, so hopefully most people are through the line and you've gotten your plate, and this is going to be pretty casual. So this is a lunch, and the primary goal of lunch is to eat. So when you get done with your first plate, if you're still a little bit peckish, go get another plate. That's fine with us. We like to eat. We like to feed you. So welcome. This is the Education and Training Luncheon, and really this luncheon is focused around things that impact medical students and residents. But I think some of the topics that we present every year are probably pretty helpful to faculty members as well. And so this year, our topic is taking your research from concept to publication. We're going to talk about, you have this idea, how do you get it out there into the literature, and what are all the steps in between? And maybe how do you get it on a podium up here at this conference? So I'm Jade Gallimore. I'm from Charleston, West Virginia. It is my pleasure to moderate this panel. I'm up here with some big names and some big people, so I feel a little intimidated right now. All right, so up first, we're going to have Dr. Maggie Hodges. She's the Assistant Professor of Gastrointestinal Surgery and the Associate Program Director of the MIS Fellowship at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And she'll start by talking about from concept to data, that first step. Up next will be Dr. Kenneth Sharp. He's the Vice Chair for Faculty Promotion and Development and a Professor of Surgery at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. And I'm so glad that my chair is not here right now to hear me say this, because I'm going to tell you he is the most handsome and best past president of the Southeastern Surgical Congress. He'll be talking to us about from data to abstract. Up next is Dr. Rachel McCaffrey. She's a breast surgical oncologist at the, is it Alana, I was so close, Alana Health Cancer Institute in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where she provides comprehensive multidisciplinary care for patients with benign and malignant breast disease. She's going to tell us how to walk the walk and talk the talk. And as she described it to me a little bit earlier, she's going to help you all learn from some mistakes maybe she made earlier in her career. And then up last, certainly not least, but to anchor this entire panel, we have Dr. Don Nakayama. He's a Senior Associate Dean of Mercer University School of Medicine's Columbus campus and the Medical Director of Pediatric Surgery at Piedmont Columbus Regional. Probably more importantly to the panel, he is currently the Editor-in-Chief of the American Surgeon and the Assistant Editor of the Journal of Pediatric Surgery. So when he talks to us about immortalizing my research through publication, this is probably because he knows something about that. So without further ado, I will turn over the podium to Dr. Hodges.
Perfect. Thank you for that very kind introduction, and thank you to the Congress for the opportunity to discuss with you today all the lessons that I've learned through my own failures. So we'll start off the conversation today with what do you do with your idea? Borrowing for any of those with children in the room from a really lovely children's book I recommend highly. I have no relevant disclosures outside of the fact that most of this advice, again, is coming from my own mistakes and my own gaps in knowledge in the past that I am continuing to fill in. And so please recognize that there's certainly more in this presentation than I can even hope to present today. So the first step is finding your idea. I would challenge you to cultivate your curiosity, whether you're in medical school or residency or in the early stages of your career. Recognize that there are always more questions to be asked and more knowledge to be found. And if you ever find yourself thinking, well, I can't come up with a good question or everything has been asked before, I would consider you probably stayed at the top of that yellow hill there, feeling really confident about life, which is a great place to be. But recognize that insecure canyon is likely coming for you like it has for all of us and will continue to come for all of us at various moments in our career. But that insecure canyon is a moment of opportunity and a moment where you should find yourself kind of questioning things and identifying those questions and trying to develop the expertise to climb that hill. Look around you, look at your patients who are coming to clinic and how they're getting there and what you're discussing with them. in the operating room, what you're offering them, in textbooks where you find yourself finishing a chapter and thinking, well, gosh, I still have this question and it wasn't answered. And at home, how is your family learning? How is your family adapting? How are you integrating with your family? Because the lessons are available all around us. And once you've found that idea, it's really important that you understand your question, because we all wake up, we all have those moments where we wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my gosh, this is a brilliant idea, this is going to make my career. But it's important to know if somebody has already asked that. And so ask yourself what's known. Where is this gap in knowledge? And even if you've woken up with that brilliant idea, there probably is a reason why current knowledge hasn't fully addressed that problem. In these situations, I think, and for this step, it's really important that you find yourself a really good librarian. If you're coming from an academic medical center, your health services librarians can be incredibly useful for structuring a search strategy and really being very thorough. But even if you're not at an academic medical center, if you have access to your public library systems, many times these public library systems have librarians who would love to help you with your research and have interlibrary loan programs to kind of help avail you of the resources out there and can help you with these research strategies as well. The third step is defining your question. So you finally identified it, you know what's out there and what's not out there, and now you really need to be specific about defining your question, because if your question is not specific, you're going to find yourself a whole world of new questions, but aren't going to be very successful in answering the question you've identified. There are a multitude of frameworks available out there to help really refine your question that have really great acronyms like SPICE and SPIDER. The most common one that I've run across is the PCOS framework, and so down here on the bottom right is kind of the PCOST variant thereof, but it really helps you understand and forces you to define what patient population am I looking into, what problem am I trying to address, and then what intervention am I hoping to understand, what comparison group do I need to define, and what outcomes do I need to be specific about before you dive into this research question. There's nothing like doing a very in-depth 1,000-patient chart review only to get to the end of it and the end of your analysis to realize you need to go back and pull 2 more pieces of data on every single patient. So try and identify these things ahead of time. They say that study type and time here are optional in this framework, but I would encourage you to consider those as well as, again, very relevant to ultimately refining your question. And then you get to plan your project. So what data do you need? Because it's all about data. Does it already exist? It's very handy if it does. Lots of resources go into collecting that data. Understand what institutional resources you have available to you in terms of developing data sets or data sets that you may already have access to. Understand what publicly available data sets there might be that you have access to without having to pay for it, and what city, state, local, regional, federal resources there might be to, again, avail yourself of that data. What data do you need? Again, this is where relying on that PCOS framework can be really helpful, because you've already defined for yourself what it is that you are trying to dive into. But how much do you need? So how many patients do you need in order to really develop a comparison group to reach statistical significance for whatever outcome that you're hoping to look into? And then do you need to collect it? If so, who's going to do it? Is it going to be you between cases or after charting? Do you have resources, medical students, graduate students, research assistants who can help you with it? If so, how are you going to store it and make sure it's HIPAA compliant? And what data exactly do you need? Again, reflecting back on that framework. And then what data can you get? Not all EMRs are created equal. Not all data sets are created equal. And so understanding the data that you have access to and the limits therein. Again, really defining the data that you need and that you have is critical. So what time frame? If you want to study an intervention, you want to make sure that the time frame of the data that you have access to matches a time frame where that intervention was even active, whether that's prospective or retrospective. Are you looking cross-sectionally at a population, or do you need a data set that allows you longitudinal access? Claims-based data sets can be great for longitudinal data collection, but EMR data can sometimes only be cross-sectional, or some of our quality databases are more cross-sectional in nature. And the geographic scale. If you're hoping to look at relationships perhaps between outcomes and socioeconomic factors or environmental exposures, looking at something on a regional scale versus a census tract scale is going to be very different in what you're able to derive from that data. And then do you want mortality data? Is one of your outcomes mortality? Because not all data sets have access to mortality data, and that includes EMR level data. And then finally, the really fun part is, do you need an IRB or an IACUC protocol? The answer is, if you're doing research on humans, you need an IRB protocol. And if you're doing research on animals, you need an IACUC protocol. Going through the city training is really helpful in defining exactly what level of protocol you may need. And or a lot of academic institutions and a lot of institutions across the board will require the city training and frequent updates. And then finally, what personnel do you need? Can you do this all yourself? If so, awesome. If not, what training and qualifications do you need to contribute to your research? Do they need expertise in animal work or bench science or data science? And how do they benefit? Do you have money for them? Outstanding. Can you provide them training? Great. Mentorship, something we can all offer. And publications and presentations. But it's a two-way street. And this is the part in the talk where it becomes a choose-your-own-adventure novel for any child of the 80s who really enjoyed these series. Do you have access to all the data and the personnel that you need? And if the answer is no, we get to go on to step 5. So be strong, because this step is finding your own funding. Regardless of which stage in, again, your training or your career you're at, when it comes time to look for funding, look broadly. If you are in the stages of negotiating a contract or looking for a job, this is when you need to think about what startup funds might you want to request, or what protected time might you want to negotiate for. It's much easier to do on the front end than after that position is in place. What institutional funding opportunities might be available in the form of pilot grants or training grants? Look at your societies and be creative. Look at industry funding. Talk to insurers about what disease processes or outcomes are interesting to them to help reduce their financial burden. And then consider non-traditional funding mechanisms like NGOs, again, and industry. And then apply, because no one just shows up at your door and hands you money for your grant. You've got to apply, because it's not going to happen otherwise. And in the course of applying for grants, write and rewrite and get feedback from as many people in as many places as you can. I highly recommend taking a grant writing course, which several societies and organizations offer, and you should look to your own institution as well, because much of the research infrastructure available may involve grant writing resources for you. I will say I've taken at least 2 or 3 in my career so far, and have gotten very different information from all of them based on what stage I'm at and what type of funding I'm considering. And then cultivate a grant writing group. This can be people at your institution, it can be people outside of your institution. I would argue for you that the more varied, the better. Because if someone in a humanities field can read your grant and understand it and get excited about it, then I think you've done your job. So again, you want your idea to make sense and appeal to anyone who's going to read it. And then reapply, because the likelihood that you get funded on the first or second or third or fourth time is pretty low. I worked really hard to find a source for this. I will say at several of the grant writing workshops that I've been to, what I've heard is that when it comes to NIH funding, surgeons routinely score higher than non-surgeons. But if not funded, are less likely to reapply. So we do a good job, and these funding structures are interested in the work that we do, and we need to be persistent. So again, look for institutional funding, NGO funding, industry funding, insurer funding, and look to collaborators. And I would encourage you to check out the Congress's Research Collaborative to try and identify colleagues who share interests and can work towards multi-institution collaboration. So finally, you've gotten through step 5, the slog that it might be. You have the money you need. You're ready to move on and start doing the work. So you get to do it. I would say first and foremost, and this stage should really start before or while you're applying for that funding, is protecting your time. Talk to your partners, your division chief, your department chairs, and make sure that you are supported in protecting the time necessary to do this research. Even if you're not the one writing the code till all hours of the night, you need to be able to work with the folks who are and communicate with them. This is a sample of one of my upcoming weeks. Unfortunately, there's no OR time on there. But if I didn't block off that big chunk of blue in the middle to accomplish research, I guarantee it will get eaten up by lots of little meetings and anybody who sees a gap on your schedule. We're very popular people as surgeons. People want our time and our opinion and our effort. So be deliberate about protecting your time. Create a timeline. There's lots of fun apps and toolkits that you can use to kind of create your own timeline. But set regular meetings, assign tasks, keep yourself accountable to those tasks and hold your team accountable as well. Communicate. Make it easy. Lots of different technologies out there now. Maybe a small silver lining to the COVID pandemic is we're all more used to virtual interactions and asynchronous work. So make it easy on yourself. Find something that works for you and your teammates. Make sure when you're communicating it's clear and it's often and that you're closing the loop. And then set a structure. I would say as you're building your research infrastructure, or if you're just joining a lab and participating in that infrastructure, find out what kind of onboarding you need to do. Do you need to do that city training? Do you need help with that ICOOC protocol, or at least read it so you can find out kind of what's going on? Are there kind of standard operating procedures for the experiments that you're running, or for data handling and evaluating that data so that when you look at a data set, you can look for outliers and understand the data before you start running an analysis with it? And then prepare to pivot, because like we had the opportunity to hear from several of our colleagues this morning in the resident session, not all the results that you get are going to be what you expect. And when it hurts, observe, because you can still learn something from those results that you don't anticipate. Celebrate those successes with your team. Team meetings, team dinners, social activities, take them out to dinner at conferences. Celebrate the successes, build that morale, because a lot of research can be demoralizing. I think all of us have been there for the results that didn't quite come through. But build the relationships and collaborations and share ideas. You can never, I think the philosophy that I was trained in is that hoarding ideas is never good for anybody. You find yourself in an echo chamber pretty quickly. So share the ideas, bounce ideas off of each other, develop ideas with colleagues and collaborators, because it will make you all stronger for it. Identify targets and deadlines. Know what conferences and publications and future grant opportunities that you're aiming for so that you can make sure you have preliminary data or abstracts ready and papers ready. And then you get to generate the data. And all throughout this, the next step is also finding your next project, because while you're learning to pivot, while you're generating the data, more questions are likely to come up. So keep a list of those questions. Find some way to kind of keep those in the back of your head and be always thinking about, where am I going to go from here? Because very few of us are blessed enough to find that one great idea that's going to last us our entire career. And rarely will your career stop with that one idea. And then I would say the final comment is be thankful to those around you, because you will learn a lot taking your ideas from concept to data. You will learn a lot from your mentors and your partners, and you cannot do this without them. And I will say I've learned the most from my current and my past mentees, not only in how to be a mentor, but in how to be a better mentee myself. And so again, learn from all of those around you, and best of luck on the course of generating things.
Good afternoon. I was humbly introduced by Dr. Gallimore. None of it's true. So I'm going to talk to you today about, now that you've gotten your data, and we could have a long discussion about how good is your data, how properly was it analyzed and so forth. I'm not going to do that. But we're going to talk about, now that you have completed a project, it's time now to write it up in order to get it presented. This is part of the academic game. You want to do this on a frequent basis. I have no disclosures. This is not a financially rewarding area. So first, let's talk about packaging your submission. You've got some data, you had some intent with what you wanted to do with it, and now you want to present it. You want to have it successfully accepted to the Southeastern Surgical Congress or other organizations. So abstract writing is its own little obscure group of writing instructions. Almost all abstracts have the same or similar structure: an introduction, methods, results, and a conclusion. Very simple, but they need to have some drama. So let's talk a little bit about how to structure these. Now let's see if this will advance. Oh, it did, didn't it? Okay, 250 words is a very common limit. It's really tough to get your 2 years worth of work and 18 tables worth of data into 250 words. So you're thinking about an introduction, 20 to 30 words. We'll come back to this again, but you need to have some impact in your introduction. I'll make some great examples here. The surgical treatment of ingrown toenails is controversial. No technique has been fully developed as the most superior. We intended to study 2 methods of taking care of ingrown great toenails and assess their outcomes. That was a little bit more than 30 words, but you get the drift. You've got to say, what's the problem, what's known about it, and what did we do about it? The methods, 80 to 90 words, maybe cut a few of those off. The results, 80 to 90 words, and a conclusion. These all add up to 250 if you go down the columns properly. So the less you put in it, the more you can make in your conclusion. The more you put in your methods, results, and introduction, the less room you have for a conclusion. And so I would say that we found that ingrown toenails treated with laser therapy was statistically superior to that done with electrocautery. That's a conclusion, okay? You proved your point. So when it comes down to what kind of abstract are you going to write, you have to be thinking about what's your goal, where are you going? And so in most societies, we're looking at what's the society there for. If it's the ASMBS, they don't want to hear about ingrown toenails. They want to hear about bariatric surgery or metabolic advances. Is it a basic science study or is it a clinical study? What are they looking for? They may be looking for both. You may be asked to categorize. This is a basic science topic on GI surgery and molecular immunology of the GI tract. Case reports. Okay, the Southeastern Surgical Congress is what I call a starter organization. We accept case reports. We don't publish them, but we accept them as a way of getting you started in your academic career. It's a lot easier to start with, we described 2 cases of metastatic adenocarcinoma of the earlobe to the adrenal. Pretty interesting, I thought. Not much that anybody else can do anything with, okay? So case reports are not bad starter projects as a resident. You don't have time to do a study of 100 patients who need ingrown toenails fixed during your residency. So I fully believe, Dr. Nakayama will probably disagree with me here, but I really believe in the value of case reports. The case report writer will learn a lot more than anybody who reads the abstract. Novel questions, okay? Let's do something new, okay? Laser treatment of ingrown toenails. I'm not aware of that as a technique, but maybe it is. Maybe it's really good. Good methodology. We randomized the treatment of patients with ingrown toenails to a standard treatment with electrocautery and phenol to laser excision. And then we did a double-blinded follow-up of those patients. That's pretty good methodology. We analyzed them with the following statistical methods. And let me tell you, I'm not the right person to tell you about data analysis or statistical analysis. Get help. Get help. Get help before you start. One of the most common problems I've seen with abstracts, I will tell you, I conservatively between review jobs with the Southeastern Surgical Congress, the Southern Surgical, and the American College of Surgery, I have easily reviewed more than 5,000 abstracts over the last 20 years. I have seen the best of the best and the worst of the worst. And the most common problem I see is we decided to do an antibiotic study. We compared Ancef with vancomycin for the prevention of postoperative infections in vascular surgery. And guess what? You'd have to study about 100,000 people to show a difference in the outcome of those. If you don't do your power calculations ahead of time, you're wasting your time. because you end up with a study and you say, well, vancomycin was statistically significantly better. Well, probably, but not really, because you don't look at the beta errors and looking at type 2s where you really don't have what you think you showed. Broad appeal versus very specialized, okay? Ingrown toenails are not going to be really of great interest to many other societies, but the podiatrist would love it. Extremely specialized things need to go to specialized meetings. Systematic reviews and meta-analysis. One of my professors, actually one of my friends, taught me that there are 3 kinds of lies in this world: lies, damned lies, and meta-analysis. So I think that we have to be careful here about what you can do. This can be a good outcome, this can be really important, but it's most likely to be accepted if it's based upon something that you determine is practice changing in the result of your meta-analysis. Other considerations. In the abstract, you need to put the meaningful data and statistics. You don't go into an extended discussion of how you did a reverse p-squared meta-analysis of X, Y, and Z, okay? Most of us don't understand sophisticated analysis statistically, and so you're just going to confuse the reviewers. Meet the submission criteria, okay? Every society, every meeting will have, we're taking abstracts to be presented at the Southeastern Surgical Congress. They're limited to 250 words, and they'll have several other things like, do not put identifying information in the abstract. That is, do not put that this is the result of an analysis of 100 cases of X, Y, and Z at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. We do not want the institution identified. We do not want to hear about what you did, as it becomes almost an advertisement in some ways. So don't identify yourself in the body of the abstract. Don't identify the institution or institutions that are involved. Use spell check. It's embarrassing to submit an abstract that has typos and grammatical errors. I can't emphasize this enough. No identifying information. And it's better to have one strong abstract than multiple weaker ones. So cutting up the sausage, as they say. So you don't want to say, submit 3 abstracts. Our experience with melanoma of the foot, we showed X, Y, Z. Our experience with melanoma of the lower leg. Our experience with melanoma between the knee and the groin. That's slicing it too much. That will not be well received by an abstract review committee. Our experience with lower extremity melanoma might be really good. But when you cut it out into the foot, the ankle, the knee, etc., it's not. So, in your introduction, you want to bring out your hypothesis. Every study needs a hypothesis. We believe that our experience with laser excision of ingrown toenails is superior to standard techniques. To show that, to investigate that, we performed the following study. The background is important, okay? Recurrence after excision of ingrown toenails is very common. Historical techniques show a recurrence rate of 30%. And the work is relevant to the field. Okay, again, I have to go back to the podiatrists. They're probably very interested in this. But I would venture to say that Dr. Nakayama would accept a paper on successful innovations in the treatment of ingrown toenails. Rural surgeons deal with this all the time. We don't deal with it too much at Vanderbilt, and probably not at your institution, but it is not an inconsequential problem. I won't actually put that question to you, Don. The research design, how did we do our study? We performed a chart review of all of our patients at our institution with adenocarcinoma of the earlobe metastatic to the adrenal gland. We compared 2 surgical techniques in a double-blinded fashion. The scientific method is followed, appropriate analysis is done, appropriate statistical analysis, and the database sources are appropriate, okay? You can't probably do a good EPIC-based chart review because you don't know how the accuracy of the EPIC database may be for this problem, for your problem. The data, again, you've got to design this clearly, and it's got to be well structured. Accurate reporting of inferential statistics. No, there was a trend in this result. Okay, you can flip a quarter 10 times, and it comes up heads 7 times. Well, that's not statistically significant, but you don't want to then follow and say, well, there was a trend to this quarter that it had landed heads up more commonly. Okay, either accept your statistics or don't. Trends are not statistics. So when you say that we did a laparoscopic repair of a perforated duodenal ulcer, and the 20 patients who had laparoscopic repairs did better than the 20 who had an open repair, and there were statistically significant differences. Well, there may be, but your selection criteria are unclear, and so you don't want to start saying things like, well, 12 of the laparoscopic patients died and 17 of the open patients died. Well, there's a trend towards more people dying from open repair of perforated duodenal ulcers. Don't get into that trap of saying trends, because they're not significant. Many of the abstracts will accept figures or tables, and that's often a great way to strengthen your abstract, to have one table or one figure showing the outcome. Originality. It's nice that it's completely new. It is nice to say, okay, we confirmed Dr. Gallamore's study on ingrown toenails that they're better treated with laser excision. This has not been previously confirmed. Fair game, okay? But it's better if it's completely novel. But again, it's not wrong to redo things and to compare your results to somebody else's results with the same or similar technique. And I added this in blue because this is increasingly an issue. And some of the abstract forms will ask you for this and some will not, and that is acknowledging AI acknowledgement and involvement. Did AI write or rewrite your abstract? Did AI perform the statistical analysis? Because that's now a real issue. And because we all are aware of AI hallucinations, that's going to be looked at with more scrutiny. So beware the use of AI. So I just recently was on a call with the American College of Surgeons Scientific Forum Committee. They were talking about how to write a good abstract for submission to the scientific forum. And they presented, I'm taking these comments straight from that call. What reviewers say about good abstracts. I'm not going to read all this, but great work meets our objectives to present impactful work that will change the standard of care. Fantastic work, innovative idea. And what do they say about bad abstracts? Significance of the work is unclear. It's unclear whether laser excision of ingrown toenails is superior to me. Interesting concept, but the grammar is poor and the abstract is hard to understand. Abstract just reports data. There was not really a study involved. It was just a collection of data and then presentation of the data. Interesting, but the conclusions overreach the methods and the data. Highlights an important problem, but with no clear solution. That's enough on abstract writing. I'll be happy to take any questions. Are we going to do those at the end?
Yeah,
Okay,
we'll
good.
do them all at the end.
Great.
All right, good morning. Again, Rachel McCaffrey. I actually know Dr. Sharp because I used to work at Vanderbilt, but now I'm up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is my very meta moment that I am at a scientific meeting presenting about presenting at scientific meetings. So the whole purpose of this is to explicitly talk about what is never explicitly talked about. Most scientists, most people in medicine or mathematics are terrible public speakers. They're terrible at getting a message across. And that is half the challenge in being a career scientist or a surgeon scientist, is you have to get a message across and you have to do it well, because that's how you're going to get funding. That's how you're going to rise up in societies. If that's your goal, that's how you're going to promote yourself throughout your entire career, and we all stink at it. So the tearing apart of presentations and public speaking starts now. Please notice how badly this title slide projects in this room because it's pretty well lit, okay? That's half the problem, is you don't know what you're coming into. I don't have presenter mode here. I know that was a problem for people. I don't necessarily know what the lighting in the room is going to be. I don't even know if I get one of these or if I have a computer, or all these details factor into how well you're going to present and how comfortable you feel up here, because it's really hard. I'm lucky that I don't come from a medicine background in my personal life. I have a lot of financiers, marketers. I know a lot of people outside in business that are very good at public speaking. So I came into this well prepared, but what I didn't know was a lot about the other stuff about presenting. So again, it's safer to do dark text on a light background just to guarantee it's going to project well no matter where you are. And that's specifically for PowerPoint. So we're going to do, okay, what do you do after it gets accepted to the meeting? And you've got to make a poster. You've got to make a 3-minute quick shot oral presentation with 5 slides, or maybe a few more. You have to know the structure and presenting techniques. And again, this is very meta. Notice I'm intentionally not saying I counted on average between 30 and 60 ums at the resident forum today. That affects the clarity of your message. People that are very monotone and they talk very quietly and they're talking about their scientific data, you start tuning them out because there is no inflection in the voice, there are no pauses. Mostly when you think about good public speakers, you don't think about scientists, right? You think about politicians, you think about pop culture icons, you think about CEOs that can get a message across so clearly. And so if you use these soft skills and you learn them, you're going to be much more successful when you come to a meeting like this. I just like fun quotes. Speaking of a bad public speaker, Albert Einstein was a terrible public speaker, but we all quote him, right? Because he knew that he wasn't good in public forums, so he always had small groups, intimate groups, one-on-ones. He was never a very good public speaker. All right, so first off, when you're doing a presentation, I'll reiterate this again, see how busy this slide is? There's so many frickin' words. You're distracted trying to read that while I'm chit-chatting, and like, where's your focus? So again, just showing you kind of a not great example. But congratulations, you got accepted to a meeting. Now you have to determine, can I go? How do I get there? The timing of it, the money of it, who my support system is. Like, that's hard as a medical student, even harder as a resident. Most programs will support you, but you have to figure that minutia out before you can truly accept the invitation. So there's those logistics that you have to think about. What format is your abstract going to take? Did you get accepted for a poster? Cool. Did you get accepted for a poster where you have a certain amount of time to formally speak? Or is it more of like an informal poster session where a whole ballroom is just filled with multiple posters and you're hanging out standing by your thing and got to say hi to everybody that walks by? Or do you have a quick shot oral presentation that's usually about 3 to 5 minutes in length, depending on the meeting? Or is it a longer presentation format where you have more slides, more minutia that you can get into about your data? Your research mentor should help you. And that's the challenge, is that, you know, what we don't know, we don't know. Your mentor is going to show you certain things, but if you find someone in your program who's like, wow, they always get up to talk at Grand Rounds or M&M and it sounds so good, like, what did they do? So sometimes it is your research mentor, sometimes it's other people. Cast the net wide, because we all have to learn this kind of organically, and the more people you can ask about, well, how do you prepare for a presentation? What do you do? It could be something as stupid as, I always wear these earrings, because that sets me in the right mind. Or I need things printed out in front of me, even though I may not read off of them, I need that backup. Those kinds of minutia actually really matter when you're trying to get a point across. And they should help you practice, and they should help you edit your presentation or poster. All right, so creating the presentation. Tips and tricks for posters: less words, more pictures, if you can swing it. That's going to grab someone's attention as they're walking by. In a room like the last American Society of Breast Surgery meeting had 150 posters. And you're just like scrolling through posters, and then like this visual catches your eye, and you're like, oh, I'm going to go over and look at that one. All right, so that's how you grab people's attention. Make sure the poster is relatively balanced visually, and I'm going to give you some examples of my terrible previous posters versus some more recent good ones. It's going to be fun. and get one point across, a poster or an abstract or even like a quick shot oral presentation, you got one thing that people are going to probably remember. If you try for 3, it's iffy, but 1 point, people are going to put that in their pocket and remember it. Have an elevator speech. So you go to medical school, you go to residency, you get your first job. That, oh, tell me about yourself question. That's like a total gimme for most, interviewers to ask you. You got to get that 30-second to 2-minute speech down about yourself. Like, what are your high points? You have to do the same thing for your research. What are the high points about this? What's going to grab people's interest? And you got to get that down. And it's a very brief speech, because if you can't explain it easily and quickly, you're not comfortable enough with your research. And you need to get more comfortable with it. You need to ask all the stupid questions that you were too afraid to ask before, but now you're going to a meeting, you want to make your institution look good, so be brave and show vulnerability to your mentor, saying, like, I didn't quite understand this piece and how I should explain that. And your mentor should be able to help you explain it better so that your elevator speech is more smooth. If you are not a good public speaker, if it makes your heart race, your palms sweat, you don't feel good about this, practice in front of a mirror. Practice in front of your mom. Practice in front of your colleagues. Practice to multiple mentors until it becomes comfortable. We're all very practiced at taking standardized testing, right? But all of us get really nervous as residents going into oral boards because you didn't practice that format as much as you think you did. All right, so if you need to practice to feel comfortable public speaking, please, dear God, do it. And practice with your research mentor, like I've said before. All right, so here's the fun one. This is the first poster I ever did as a medical student. It is terrible, okay? First off, dark background, the white boxes around the text, and can you even read that chart? It's huge up on a screen. You can't even read it here. Could you read it when I printed it out on the poster? No, you could not. So it's not a good visual. The other visual should have been more prominently displayed. I probably shouldn't have, the results should have been figured out in a better way. But this is what I'm saying, I was relying on my mentors to show me what to do and how to present data. And they didn't know what they didn't know. And so this is the result. So sometimes you need to reach outside of your little bubble to figure out, okay, what can make these things look better? So, the only good thing I'll say about this one is that in general, the text and the intro methods and the summary is relatively brief. So the weight of the poster is more on the visual and less on the words, but that's the only good thing I can say about this one. All right. Fast forward to when I was a fellow, and I was lucky enough that some meetings actually have skins or templates for you. Use them because they're color coordinated, they look a lot slicker, they visually are easier on the eye. So here, white background, dark text, works for PowerPoint, works for posters. A little unbalanced because all the text is on one side and all the visuals are on the other, but with the shaping and honestly, my deadline, I didn't have a lot of time to go play around with the balance, but maybe I could have done intro methods one side, put the visuals in the middle, the results and conclusion, maybe tightened up the visuals so it looks more like a third visually across the poster. There's always room for improvement. You do the best you can. All right, this is another one I did relatively recently. It's good and it's bad. Too many words. There's too many words in the backgrounds, methods, results. The conclusion is brief. All right? And what I tried to do with this one was tell you, okay, here's the objective and here's the conclusion, so that catches your eye, because I knew that all this wording was probably not the best, but I wanted to get my point across, so that's why the aim is highlighted in its own little visual text box, and the conclusion is highlighted. So if you took nothing else away, that's what you saw, and the visuals are what you saw with some basic graphs. The up front one, this is basic, and the visual of the mag trace, it's a dye that we use for sentinel lymph node surgery. It's a newer one. We're talking about okay, why would you ever switch to this one? What is it useful for? Does it actually save you money? That was the point of this. Is it good for money saving? And then we had a separate thing on, is it good for the clinical aspect of its use? And so we're trying to show, okay, well, if you use it in this way, it actually does save money, even though there might be a return to an operation. You actually save people axillary surgery operations by using this. So it's with just a picture, what is that? Oh, it's for breast surgery. Oh, I'm not interested in that. Move on. Or I attract the people that I want to attract because they're like, oh yeah, MagTrace, I want to learn more about that. And then we have a visual of like timelines of upfront surgery versus delayed surgery for the axilla, and then cost analysis. So I liked that this had more visuals. I knew it was a little wordy, but given the methodology of the data abstraction, I really had to be clear about that. That's why the methods is like so uncomfortably long. All right, PowerPoints. The whole format, start a draft, but do look for templates. Big national meetings, SSO, the American College of Surgeons usually have templates that you're going to end up using, so you can at least start drafting your PowerPoint while you're waiting for the skin to be released at some point. Usually, I'm not a procrastinator, so I do things way ahead of time, and then it's like a month later that the template comes out, and then I have to integrate it and finalize it. But that's how it is. Usually a 3-minute quick shot, you want 5 content slides. And you want to be able to explain your data that cleanly in 5 content slides if you can, all right? Maximum 4 lines of text, and use animations if you have to put more text in. For example, that's 1 paragraph. And then I wanted to talk to you about background and text color like I talked about at the title slide. Like light background, dark text is usually easier in any format, whether there's a lot of lighting or it's a dim room, people can still read it. And it's also kind to the colorblind. Because if you put, you know, light green text on a dark blue background, like it gets really weird. I've seen some very odd color combinations, or like a black background with red text. Nobody can read that. So just an iteration of that again. And again, the next transition point, so you're not overwhelmed by seeing all of this text at once. The transitions can help you put more data into a slide if you need it to. So again, you may have 1 point, and that's what you want to make. All right. So here's some examples of the good, the bad, and the ugly of my previous PowerPoint slides. So this is a American College of Surgeons abstract that I did for trauma research. They gave me a skin, so like this is how it was supposed to be, and the American College of Surgeons understood like light background, dark text works. And then I put this slide up. Is your brain broken yet? Like what the hell, right? I didn't use transitions. It was way too busy. It's because I was a 2nd-year preliminary resident, like trying to struggle to survive in like 2nd year of residency, right? So I wasn't comfortable enough to really integrate the data into my brain to be able to just verbally explain it and put just a couple bullet points on a slide. I gave them this mess. There you go. Didn't really stick in people's heads. This is a more recent talk I did, thanks to Dr. Sharp giving me that wonderful invitation to do like a 10-minute like hot topic presentation on something. Yeah, it was 6 minutes. I had 6 minutes, and basically the only slide I had in this entire presentation was this one. It's a visual that I can take 6 minutes to explain because I intimately know this whole clinical process and can explain it to people. And this is the only slide that I really need. I had it like at the beginning, it was this slide, and then like a little bit of like, oh, if you want to read more, these are the, you know, the research protocols that kind of dictate this clinical scenario. And then again at the end, this again, because I want you to understand like this is the overall picture of axillary management when neo-chemo is involved for breast cancer patients. That's my point. So again, very meta. I am up here. I'm not saying I took 3 deep breaths before I started talking, and I'm not just sitting here looking at this, I'm looking at all of you, because I have basically integrated this slide deck into my brain. So I don't even need to look at it. I can just look at you guys, which is way more fun for me, and also more verbally and visually interesting for you all. And that is what people will remember. All right. So you practice more than you think, even if you're not comfortable with public speaking. Every time you call an attending at 2 a.m., you are public speaking. You are trying to get a story and a point across succinctly and engage them, because if you start telling them the past medical history of an 85-year-old with a ruptured AAA, you're going to put them back to sleep. But if you start the conversation with, we have an 80-year-old with a ruptured AAA, hypotensive and needs to go to the operating room, let me give you some background data. Now I'm wide awake because, oh shit, we got to go to the operating room. All right, so you practice more than you think. Grand rounds, M&Ms, coming to things like this. This is a good regional meeting. It gets some presenting chops under your feet before maybe you go to a national meeting. So you practice more than you think. If it makes you uncomfortable, like we don't practice public speaking very often in surgery, in medicine, in science in general, practice more, okay? Look at examples of people that do good public speaking that you think of when you think of, oh, that person speaks really well. Watch them and kind of analyze what they're doing. How much are they looking at the screen? How much are they pointing at things? How much are they just talking to you? And if you need to write it down because you're nervous, that's okay. That's a mental crutch to make you feel more prepared so that you look more comfortable up on stage. But do not just read it. Do not read what you've written in some monotone voice like you're droning on, because again, that is not good verbal content. It's not going to keep people's attention. And try not to write everything on your PowerPoint slides and just read the slides. I'm sure you've seen countless examples of people doing that. It gets really boring. Don't do that. You'll put people to sleep. And then this is actually a quote directly from my mom, who has spoken at the UN multiple times. Take 3 deep breaths before you start. It physically lowers your heart rate, because naturally when we get up to speak, our heart rate is fast, and that physiologic deep breathing will slow you down, and it will make you less nervous. Thank you.
Okay, I'm ready. All right. This is my part, how to publish your work, what editors are actually looking for. Our objectives are these. Why papers are rejected? Important question. How to make case reports and single-center retrospective studies publishable. How to transform a rejected paper into an accepted one. And how we're making the American Surgeon as a journal an educational platform through structured advanced evaluation, and we call that pre-peer review. So, when patients benefit and surgeons learn and the evidence is clear, publication follows. We have 2 different tasks. The program committee has to show that patient benefit and surgical learning matter. They look at the topic and they select their abstracts on that basis. The journals have to ask a different question. Show us how you know. You have to show us the evidence. Clinical relevance opens the door. That's what the program committee does. Inferential discipline gets you through it, and that's what the paper does. So, case reports. What editors are looking for, you know, they've had a bad name, case reports, but there are case reports that really do work. A perfect example is there's a pediatric surgeon who figured out that infants in forward-facing car seats were getting smashed and getting killed. And so it was her case report, Celeste Hollins, who advocated for rear-facing child seats. And so that really made a difference. Another good case report is AIDS, the first description of Kaposi sarcoma. That's another consequential case report. So we do want case reports. So why don't you write this up is generally a bad first step. We are not looking for a rare case. We're not looking for the first reported or the images alone. What we do want is an insight into patient care and something that adds to an experienced surgeon's knowledge. Yes, a unique take on anatomy, biology, diagnosis, or therapeutics. We're all interested in that. Yes, a broad clinical question that surgeons face. Yes, a platform for synthesis and guidance. All those things are proper topics for case reports. So let's have the American Surgeon. That's what TAS stands for, the American Surgeon example. The original submission of a case report was a rare case with good radiological and images from surgery, but it got rejected because it was narrow, it was descriptive, and it gave no general lessons. How it was salvaged, we reframed it as a case-based review, and that's directly from the critique, okay? Make this into a case-based review. You've done a lot of work into it. Get focused literature search, Prisma-like approach. You organize it with diagnosis, technique, and outcomes. Same case, same images were accepted as a review, a case-based review. This is how it works. Single center retrospective series, the other broad category of submissions to the Southeastern. Our experience is not enough. The quote, let's put all of our cases together and write it up is another bad first step. That's not enough to have, because the problems that we face are common and they're usually a redo of other studies and other reviews. It's not enough to be descriptive only, without a comparison group, no general message. What we want is an insight that's of interest to a clinical surgeon and of benefit to patients, okay? We want a specific question and insight that a large database and multi-center studies cannot provide. We want granularity that a single-centered review can provide. We want nuance, we want decision-making detail, we want these things, and that's the place for a single-center review. So your spin on a common product, you can sell it to the membership, you can sell it to the readership, and you can sell it to me, and then you can sell it to reviewers, okay? Those things work. So, a case report of a single-center retrospective series. About 70 patients, clean methods, but it was descriptive only. It was rejected elsewhere as incremental, no new ground. It failed because it presented and received as a local report, no benchmark, no reference to latest guidelines, no expert opinions. It was redundant to a NISQIP review that had just been published. So the question was redundant, no new ground was tilled. So how was it salvaged? You have to reframe the question. What does the data show that the NISQIP paper could not? You reframe it as a hypothesis-generating exercise. In this case, smaller is better because you can dive down into the details and figure out a question that was not addressed by the NISQIP review. The approach is critical. You ask the question first, then collect the data, rather than using the database first to answer a question that wasn't designed for. And that's the key. Same study, it was accepted after reframing. So that's the approach of using a single center review. How to deal with rejection. Most rejected patients, most rejected papers are not wrong. They are misframed. What doesn't work is you change journals, resubmit unchanged. I can't tell you the number of times that I've had cover letters addressed to Dr. Lillamo. What works? Rewrite abstract and discussions, okay? You have to reframe it for a new readership. For the American surgeon, that's focused on improved patient care and topics of interest to the clinical surgeon. You have to update the literature, and after you go through a couple iterations of this, usually the literature is outdated. First thing you do is update the literature, find out what the current standards are. You figure out if your patient list is still current because the actual treatment categories may have changed. And the salvage the salvage papers look fundamentally different. They're different, they just don't have a different addressee in the cover letter. So in order to do this, after you've gone through this, around 1,600 manuscripts come across my desk a year, and I've done this for 7 years. And all of them have certain things that just are wrong, okay? And so what I want to do, out of fairness to the journal, to upgrade the standards, out of fairness to the reviewers, because they have to go through and review these, and out of fairness to you, because I want this to be not a rejection, but something that you can learn from. We've gone through in a structured review where we go through these basic categories that address basic scholarly publication. First is sustainability and domain, okay? General surgery as defined by the American Board of Surgery. We're not going to take anything that is orthopedic. We're not going to take anything necessarily that's going to be too specialized. Not necessarily in my own specialty, pediatric surgery, not necessarily something about duodenal atresia, for example, but certainly something about acute appendicitis. Editorial domain alignment. We want to make sure that we're framed according to the things that the American surgeon has traditionally been attuned to, all right? That's clinical surgery, education, technique, okay? Those sorts of things we want to be sure of. If it's got too much of cell biology, it's not going to work. Readability and organization. It's got to be standard scholarly publication of introduction, methods, results, discussion. Okay, it's got to follow that. It's got to be readable. It has to be written well. Can't be too long. It's got to be. You have to think in paragraphs, and you have to build an argument. Positioning and contextualization. It's got to be aligned with current standards. If there's no reference to what people are doing and no reference to what the standards are now, for example, in the endocrine society or some basic society of that's relevant to your study, then it's not going to work. And then currency. We want to make sure that your literature is up to date, that the patients underwent current protocols and received current standards of care. Nearly every paper has some deficiency in one of these areas. And what I do is I go over the paper, I have a checklist, and I just dictate the checklist, and it goes into ChatGPT, and it spits out a summary of what's going on, okay? I just can't write it myself because of the sheer volume, but you get a structured critique of what you have, and if you return it and satisfy everything, then it goes to the referees, and they can focus on scholarly depth and relevance and novelty, okay? That's the way it goes. Novelty and scholarly depth. Contribution to the field, education on clinical value of interest to working surgeons. Not everything is accepted. The judgment happens with the referees, all right? It's the first pass, the pre-peer review step. Make sure that your manuscript is in shape so that the referee can concentrate on the things that count. We've had 4 papers from the 2026 meeting, and I included these just to show what problems we run into. The papers ask good practical questions that work well on a podium, but the study designs did not support the strength of the conclusions being drawn. There was non-random assignment, there's no comparative group, the variables were underspecified, the overreach beyond the data set limits. All of these are basic flaws that prevented them from really being accepted as papers. So we went through these. The authors might even be here, but you got a review and said if you shape these things up, then it'd be in shape for a peer review. There's always a program committee and a journal disconnect. The program committee rewards the clarity of ideas. The journals require evidentiary discipline. So we went through why papers are rejected, how to make case reports and single-center retrospective studies publishable, how to transform a rejected paper into an accepted one, and what we're doing with the journal to make it into a educational exercise. So, bottom line, strong ideas matter, and disciplined evidence is what lasts, okay, and that's what we're after. If patients benefit and surgeons learn, then publication follows. Thank you for your participation. It's one of the real optimistic things to see the quality of the work being presented. It just takes a little bit of work, a little bit of discipline, and it'll become publishable. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we are open for questions. So don't be shy. Come on up.
Great presentation. I really enjoyed watching. Wish my students were here with me. Some of them are, but thank you for doing this. My question is regarding AI, and I would submit that technically, I suppose, spell check and grammar is not AI, but in the true definition of AI, is it doesn't go through and use other publications, et cetera, to help. But what are the overall feelings about the use of AI and the difference between, for example, having AI write your paper and having AI do the spell check and grammar and perhaps make some comments about what might be improved? Thank you.
I think AI is a great tool. but you should start with the basics before you use it as a crutch. I mean, you know, Microsoft Word has spell check and some grammar points. You go ahead and write your first draft. And I've had some of my trainees use AI as a review tool after that, like, oh, well, let me talk to my mentor about like the content, and let me ask like ChatGPT, like, is this good? Have I made my point well, or things like that? I think it's good, but trying to use something AI related like ChatGPT or whatever other descriptive AI is out there, or generative AI, pardon me, is not the best idea as a starting off point, because you're going to shoot yourself in the foot.
I would kind of add some other concerns as well. I think I agree it's a tool, and much like other tools, you know, is just one piece of a larger kind of research puzzle. When it comes to generalizing evidence that's out there, I will say most of them tend to rely on outdated evidence. And having reviewed several articles that I'm pretty sure were written by AI, they make very gross generalizations that are not supported by the evidence or literature that they're summarizing. If you are putting your own research into a public AI domain, you have now lost control over those ideas. They go into the AI kind of feed and can be used by others, and you've lost ownership there. In the same vein, you should never put any patient information or PHI in any of these AI tools to run your data. And the problems of data hallucination is very real, and so you know, if you're pulling your data into this or throwing your data into this black box and wholeheartedly trusting the results that are coming out of it, I would caution you to have someone kind of validate those results as best as you can. I would be curious from Dr. Nakayama's and Dr. Sharp's point of view, you know, how journals and conferences are asking us to cite these things now. Are we being asked to cite them as a tool? I don't think there's a clear standard yet that I've seen in journals, but are increasingly moving towards citing them as a tool. All that to say is, again, I think it's a great tool. Some definitely social and environmental concerns regarding the use of it ethically, and some kind of structural concerns still, I think, with the tools that are available.
Yeah, our publisher, Sage Communications, has an AI policy that we follow. The ideas have to start from yourself, though, right? You're the surgeon, you're the clinician, right? You might wind up with something from the Journal of Cosmetology, for all you know, so you just have to make sure that everything that you start with and everything that you write on the first draft or in the second draft are yours and your conclusions. Then you have to check everything. If you if you wind up having the AI help rewrite certain passages, you have to make sure that those things are actually what you want to say. It is a powerful tool. It works. Let me tell you, I couldn't do the communications I have without it.
I would just simply say that, you know, we now ask in every article submitted for the author contributions. What did you do? Did you do the statistical analysis? Did you write the draft? Did you contribute editing, et cetera? And I think now it's up to you to say, AI wrote the first draft. Microsoft Copilot 365 wrote the first draft. If that's indeed what happened, I'm not sure people are going to be honest in doing that, but I think that if you use AI, it's going to become important to cite what role it played. Just like Dr. Sharp doesn't know anything about statistics and did not contribute to statistical analysis.
While you're walking up, I'll say, when you come up, if you all could introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, that way I know. I'm just nosy, that's all.
That's okay. I'm going to lower this because I'm a small human, but my name is Lacey Mead, and I'm one of the general surgery residents at Lakeland Regional Health. And I think, first, thank you for this talk. Research, I would say, is of great interest, but very difficult to complete in residency, in a surgical residency program. And so that's kind of my question, is just some advice on time management and things that have potentially worked for you all and being able to, because I think time, especially for publications, is like a huge component of that, and producing something great. And so I think just having advice in the time management aspect of all of this would be great.
I'm happy to start with this. So Research and writing, it's just like anything else that you do. You have to make time for it, right? And it's so easy. I think sometimes it gets pushed to the side because it's really easy to say, I'm going to block off this hour every week where this is my focus. And it's so easy because you're busy and you have other things competing for your interest. It's easy to be like, well, no, but that's not like a meeting I have with somebody. I'm not really going to be disappointing somebody. I can miss it this week, but then that becomes a habit too. So the best thing I can tell you is you have to make time in your schedule, which I know is difficult as a resident. I've been there. But you have to block that time off and then commit to that time. If you start neglecting that time for other things, that will become your pattern and you'll never get it done. It doesn't take a lot of time every week, but it does take consistent time and effort. So I would recommend you take an hour every week somewhere in your schedule to block it off. If you know you're on a service where maybe Wednesdays are kind of light and you're done at 4 p.m. from 4 to 5 every week, that's your time. And you don't say, oh, I'm just tired, that's your time. You have to commit to that schedule and do it every single week. If you wait for big blocks of time, you're never going to find them.
Second, kind of everything Dr. Gallimore just said. One of the things that I've kind of learned through trial and error, not to say that this will work for everybody, is try and reduce the number of times that you are duplicating your own efforts. So if you have this idea and you're diving into the literature, take that opportunity just to throw a quick PowerPoint presentation together. It doesn't have to, not for any kind of formal presentation, but just to help organize your thoughts in the literature that you find really helpful. Because otherwise you're going to pursue that idea and then you're going to generate data and you're going to have to put a presentation together and you're going to dive back into that literature and then you're going to write the paper and you're going to dive back into that literature again. And so if you can keep yourself organized from the get-go, you can really reduce the kind of efforts of, the redundant efforts of going back in and kind of diving into the literature time and time again. And you can always go back to those PowerPoints. This is what I've started having all of my mentees do as soon as they come to me and we develop a question together, is really also helps you kind of focus on that question, and a good place to put that framework in that we discussed, in addition to organizing the literature. And then when it comes time to a presentation or time for a paper, it's all right there for you to help keep you focused and to help structure the writing.
I'm going to take a slightly different tack to this, and that is look for above help. If you are, remember what's goal number one in a surgical residency? Become a good surgeon, okay? So you need to go to your program director, a mentor, a department chair, whoever it is that you think is likely to need to support you, and ask for support. I want to do this project. I want to investigate this problem, this series of patients, whatever it is. And again, this is going to sound like I'm getting on you, but let's just say that you're not very good with some of your surgical skills. If I'm your program director, I would say, I think right now you really need to concentrate on being in the simulator on that Wednesday at 4 p.m. when you have some free time. So don't do this in a vacuum. Talk to people above you who can give you honest advice and guidance, okay? If you're doing extremely well in your residency, they're going to say, that's great. I love this idea. We need more residents doing this. You can get both good and bad feedback on this, but I would say do not hesitate to go looking for help, supervision, guidance.
I was just going to say two things. One is that don't forget your day job, because the most important thing is to learn surgery. If you're a medical student, you got to pass the boards. You have to do extremely well on the boards. If you're a resident, you have to learn how to do surgery. You want to be the person that the ball is hit to. If you find yourself watching 4 football games in the weekend, you're doing it wrong. All right? And the last thing is, no one cares where you are at 5 a.m. in the morning. Okay, your family doesn't really care. Your kids may not care because they're still asleep. 5 a.m. in the morning is productive time, and budget at least 2-hour blocks, because 2 hours is the minimum you need to really get something done.
I think My last comment would be to make sure it's also that the idea is really critical, because if you find an idea that you're passionate about and you wake up with ideas for and you see it in your everyday practice and it is always ever present, you're constantly thinking about it, then while you're having those thoughts, that's research. You're thinking about it. You're structuring the study designs in your head. You're kind of thinking about how your day-to-day clinical interactions are feeding into this. And so, make sure that the idea that you're pursuing, don't just do it for the sake of kind of pumping out a presentation or pumping out a paper. Make sure that the ideas you're pursuing are something that you are, you stand behind and you believe in, and that gets you excited about doing the work, and then it doesn't become work.
All right, practical tips. I was a PGY5 all the way through clinical, no research time. I got a couple publications, not many, because I was 100% clinical. People that get research time have a real advantage. Use your advantage if that's your program. But for those that are completely clinical, find help early. To reiterate what Dr. Sharp said, I had a trauma surgeon that kind of, he and I really got along well. I felt strong in front of him. Even as an intern, I felt like I could say the things out loud during rounds to him that I couldn't. So we created a bond. And one day he's like, "You want to do a project?" I'm like, "Can I learn what the project is first?" And then found out, oh, this is kind of cool. It's like that methods slide I put up there that was terrible, but it was about senior trauma, rib fractures in the ICU and how much that improved survival, and it did. But the key facts about that was a trauma registry at a level 1 trauma center is a gold mine. It's already there, and you can slice that data 3 ways from Sunday to get some interesting data. To answer questions. So always start with the question. The data, it's almost like when the ER calls you and oh, we have appendicitis. Well, did we? And you have to think back. Don't say, oh, I have this data set. What can I find in here that's cool? It's like, well, can we use this data set for the question? Oh yeah, it's really robust to use it. National databases. I didn't have a lot of support for that in my residency because we weren't a huge, robust research program at the time. It's changed now. It's been a couple of years. But the trauma registry was local, good data, got me a podium presentation at the American College of Surgeons. I did a case report that was really novel and had implications for clinical care, could get that published. Again, speaking to how Dr. Nakayama said you get those case reports published, it has to have clinical meaning, and that case report did. And then a third one I got an abstract from, and it was about a breast topic because I was interested in breasts. I was trying to show interest in the subspecialty I was going into. It never got published, but it got me an abstract at the American Society of Breast Surgeons where I could say hello to possible potential program directors, even though the final publication died in the water 3 years later after being rejected and rejected and rejected. It happens, okay? But find mentors early. If you have your own questions, like Dr. Sharp said, go to people early and ask for help, ask for guidance, how do I do this? If you know you want to be in a subspecialty that is rigorous to get into, pediatric surgery, surgical oncology, pick your poison, start early. If you even think, oh, maybe I want to be a pediatric surgeon, don't wait till PGY 3 year when maybe you don't even have any lab time to publish umpteen papers to get you into the fellowship that you want. There you go.
Thanks, everyone. Stephen Kim from Emory. So I have a question as junior faculty, if that's okay. So I'm foolish, and I have a basic science lab. I have made a mistake early in what one could chalk up to a bad hire, but I think can more broadly be described as relying on other people's integrity when ultimately it might be your name as senior author or whatever the case might be. So I guess my question for the panel would be, have you either personally or been closely associated with an experience or an opportunity in which that relying on someone else's integrity or the data in ultimately have not been correct, and how do you recover from that? Because time and effort are both very expensive things in our line of work.
Well, I'll start with the short answer is I'm not a basic scientist, but the reason I never got that final paper published during my residency is because the data was wrong. And I wondered why I kept getting rejected. I went back to the beginning and realized the data had been pulled incorrectly from the beginning, and thus it failed.
think it's a great question. I think it's an experience that all of us are likely to have to some level in our careers as academic surgeons. When I was unfortunately I cannot speak as a faculty person, but when I was in the lab as a resident, struggled with a similar experience, and thankfully had a PI who was very supportive and acknowledged the need to shift projects and kind of pivot to something that could be more fruitful, and also had the funding available for me to stay an extra year in the lab to really make the most of the time. I think that ability to pivot and to identify, okay, what can I take out of this that can still lead me in a direction, and pursue that, and even if it's just a small redirection to kind of get you back to your original path, it would be the best advice that I can offer from absolutely no experience. But I think recognizing the problem and recognizing the need to find a path forward is obviously the first step.
I would just say that it is the responsibility of the senior or supervising author to say, I am responsible for the integrity of the data and the analysis. And if they don't do that, they're not doing their job, okay? I think that I have been loosely affiliated with some issues like this, and I had a good friend who just got burned on this. And he didn't supervise the data collection and analysis properly. He allowed a poorly trained resident to do an extensive data review, and he found out when he went to get ready to present the data that, whoa, this isn't right. And it's because he waited until the whole project was done. He said, now I'll help write the paper, and it was wrong. So he was embarrassingly confronted about 3 days before a major presentation with wrong data, and he had to change the abstract. It was embarrassing. But it's not the junior author's failure, it was the senior author's failure.
It really happens all the time, because we often get submissions from junior people, and the senior author is a senior author in name only, and so it really shows up in the responses to the reviewers' comments. It's just inadequate. So in those situations, I just emailed the senior author and says, hey, get on it, okay? Your junior author's just not making it. Fix it.
All right, it's right at 1 o'clock. We'll kind of hang around up here if you have any questions for us, but I know you're probably wanting to go put your toes in the sand or something and enjoy the beautiful weather. So thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate the participation from the audience. Hopefully you had a delicious lunch, and hopefully see you next year.
And also